The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Welcome.
Hi everyone. Welcome. I'm Christina Refford. I'm the chair of the Environmental Stewardship Committee, and I just wanted to say thank you for coming to Eileen Ryan's talk about plastics. She's from Beyond Plastics Greater Boston, as well as outside of Greater Boston, sounds like. I'd also like to thank the Queeset House for letting us use this space, and Karen Gillette for kind of helping us get in touch with Eileen and making this possible. So let's turn it over to you now.
Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm so happy you could all come out tonight. This is a beautiful space to be in and a lovely building. So I am a public speaker with Beyond Plastics. Beyond Plastics is based at Bennington College, which is also where I grew up. And my aunt is in the front row, so she knows that very well. Beyond Plastics was started by Judith Enck in 2019. She was the Region 2 EPA director during the 8 years of the Obama administration. And after her term, those 8 years were up, she decided she wanted to do something that was the intersection of climate, the climate crisis, pollution in general, environmental justice, and she decided to form Beyond Plastics. It's one of the only organizations that actually works on legislation, actively works on legislation. And I got involved with this. I've actually been involved with plastic. I've been trying to avoid plastic most of my adult life. I have been aware of, unlike most people, been aware of the hazards of plastic since the 1980s. And in about 2011 or 12, I saw a movie called Bag It, which is all about our exposure to plastics and the chemicals in plastics, and also how there's one easy thing we can do, and that is to ban plastic bags. And I was like, okay, that's a good thing to do. So I worked on that with a team of people in my community. I live in Watertown, Massachusetts, and with my friend Leslie Evans, who is the artist who created a lot of this imagery that you see here, the Plastic Kills poster. She painted that too, and you'll see more of her imagery going through. She illustrated the brochure, it's over there, and I wrote the copy. And we passed the bag ordinance in Watertown it went into effect in 2017. But how did I get involved with it? So I finished that, and I was like, I was so proud of myself. I patted myself on the back. Well, I've done enough now for plastic pollution, until I saw this movie, The Story of Plastic, which is so disturbing. This movie came to me during the pandemic in the fall of 2020. A group was organizing an online screening of it, and I was so moved by this movie. And then Judith Enck actually gave a feedback follow-up discussion about plastic pollution following one of the screenings that I went to, and she talked about the fact that she teaches a course in plastic pollution. So that was in January of 2021, and that night I signed up for the course immediately, and I took her course in the winter spring of 2021. One of the things that really stood out to me, both in the movie and then learning more about it, was the fact that 50%, and this is something I'm going to repeat over and over again, 50% of all plastic ever produced has been produced basically in the past 2 decades. So you see here this exponential rise in plastic production since 1950, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that started in 1950. The reason it started was because during World War II, resources were becoming scarce. They couldn't get silk for parachutes. They needed something. These are cockpits that they were working on. This is plexiglass. So this is sort of the first invention of plexiglass. And the reason I mentioned the silk is that These are boys who are picking milkweed pods, but in December of 2023, I had the opportunity to go to Hawaii, and I happened to be there on Pearl Harbor Day. And some people in the hotel were saying, you must go to the Pearl Harbor Day remembrance. And I did. And I met a Rosie the Riveter there who, when she was 8 years old, picked milkweed to put into life jackets for sailors who were involved in the war effort. And I was amazed to be able to find this photograph, but this is what we're talking about. So the buildup of plastic is happening during World War II. It's the chemical industry, like places like DuPont and Dow, that are very involved in producing plastics. And then after the war, they're wondering how can they take these plastics into the world and use them in other ways. But again, this is showing you how much, this is just an illustration of how much plastic pollution is out there. We don't see a lot of it here. When you watch these movies that show you around the world how much plastic is in the ocean, I feel lucky that our Massachusetts beaches do not look like some of these. Partly it has to do with ocean currents, and partly has to do with the fact that people clean up the beaches around here, and we have better waste disposal systems in general. Okay, here we're talking a little bit more about how much it's been, how much has been produced, and what. So I'm hopefully going to help you feel optimistic at the end of this, at least activated, I hope, because this is really an ecological, environmental, and human health crisis. So these are advertisements from the 1950s for cellophane, plastics. Everything's better in, wrapped in cellophane here. So the industry is really beginning to push the use of plastics. So, and DuPont is showing that they are making these synthetic fibers. They also had to, that was a whole thing that people had to get used to, this whole idea. Well, they really had to get used to this idea of a throwaway society. So this is an image that was from Life magazine that was to show that we don't need traditional utensils and plates anymore. We can just throw everything away. Right? So for people who grew up in the Depression, my mother's generation, my aunt's generation, it was all waste not, want not, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. So it was a really hard to convince people all of a sudden that they should be throwing things away. So I wanted, this is one of the questions on the quiz, so we're going to take that afterwards. Most of the plastic pollution that we are seeing that's in our environment today is from single-use plastic packaging. That is why you want to reduce that in your own life as much as possible, and we want to work on getting legislation to reduce the amount of plastic packaging. But as I go through this slideshow, you'll understand more and more why we're seeing things like bananas in plastic bags, cucumbers wrapped in plastic. This slide is from 2015, but I actually think that building and construction has definitely risen since then. You're seeing a lot more plastic being used in construction materials. So what are plastics? Plastics are made from fossil fuels and chemicals. So that's why I have on my hat, Stop Petrochemistry. So the petro is the fossil fuels and the chemicals. So most of the plastics made today are a byproduct of fracked gas called ethane. And this is a fracking well plant to show you how that works. It requires an enormous amount of water and has led to earthquakes, a lot of polluted water. People who live in the areas, a lot of the fracking takes place in Pennsylvania and Ohio, the Ohio River Valley, where there's a lot of shale. But people in those communities have often been able to turn on their faucets and light what's coming out of their faucet, which should be pure water, but instead has all this gas in it. It's very toxic, the whole fracking process. And so this is showing actually the build out of the fracking industry. And Beyond Plastics did a whole study comparing fracking to the coal industry. And see, here we already are at 2025, but they predicted that fracking was going to outpace coal power by today. But of course, we see Trump wanting to support coal again, but I don't think that's going to go too far. But all right, so how do we know how how much they want to build out the petrochemical industry. This is a really great slide from the Oil and Gas Watch that shows you where they're building out all these plants, and it lists some of the toxic chemicals that are used in them. So in the Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi River Valley, there is an 85-mile long stretch called Cancer Alley, because so many people in those communities have died of cancer and have been sickened by the build out of the petrochemical industry. They're not fracking so much down there as refining and burning and producing. And this is Sharon Levine in the middle, who is an amazing activist who has actually stood up to some of the biggest plastics manufacturing companies. One of them is Formosa Plastics, which is based in Thailand and has plants in Louisiana. So this is a slide that was made for the Atlantic Monthly that shows the overlay between where the petrochemical plants are and where the sugarcane plantations used to be, where the formerly enslaved people lived and worked. And you can see that it's almost directly lining up with that. Plastics is a huge environmental justice issue, not only, that's toxic, but one of the reasons this happened along the river here is because sugarcane plantations had large tracts of land, and so it was easier to purchase a big tract all at once. And they actually bought out a lot of the white people in the white community there, and they did not do that with the descendants of the formerly enslaved people who lived around there. And Sharon is one of those people. So this is talking a little bit more about the inequities that we're seeing with plastic production. So most of the pollution is happening in environmental justice areas. So you see that a lot in the South, but also we're seeing it more and more in the Ohio River Valley and Appalachia. And I'll have a few more slides more about that. So this is East Palestine, Ohio. This was in February of 2024, was it? Or just no, it was the year before, 2023, when a huge freight train exploded that was carrying polyvinyl chloride. These freight trains are like miles long, and then instead of coming in to remediate the whole situation, which was terrible enough, they lit the whole thing on fire. So the people who live along this area, a lot of them have been sickened. We have now a member of the Beyond Plastic staff who is from this community, and she became an activist after this happened. She's a speech and language therapist and with 2 young children, but because she was so outraged by this. This is the Shell Monaco cracker plant. A cracker plant is a place where they crack the ethane to make the pellets, which are called nurdles. So plastics they have to start from these very small pellets, which I've never had any. I wish I had some, but they're tiny. They're like little plastic beads. When they were proposing to build this is in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, about 30 miles north of Pittsburgh. A lot of activists rose up to say, we don't want this, it's going to pollute the river, it's going to pollute the air, it's so close to Pittsburgh. And yet every time these companies promise jobs, and the government believes them, but in the end, they actually end up with very few jobs in one of these. This is on 364 acres of land, and this is under construction, but it was completed in 2022. And it has proven to do everything that was predicted by the activists in terms of pollution, and it hasn't made any money at all. All right, so plastics are directly connected to the climate crisis. We know that it's only going to get hotter. We've seen wildfires in Massachusetts last year. I mean, I was shocked last fall when I woke up and I was like, oh my God, did I leave the stove on last night? What's going on? I ran through the house and there's nothing on, and it went down. And I was walking through downtown Watertown, such as it is, and I walked past the fire station, or firefighter out, and said, what's going on? He said, it's coming down from Salem. I don't know if you guys experienced that here or not, but so Plastics are the fossil fuel industry's plan B. As they see housing, transportation becoming greener, more electrification, they are pouring all their money into plastics. They're desperate. I don't know. Some of this stuff is getting back. We're sliding backwards, I think, with the current administration, but it still is their plan B. And that's why we're seeing this kind of thing in the grocery store. And that's why also, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see like cucumbers wrapped in plastic. They are pouring all their money into this. And what's really funny is some young people, one of the other members of the Beyond Plastic Speakers Bureau gave a presentation to some teenagers like, well, what can we do if we can't have cut up melon? It's like, you just buy the melon and cut it yourself, right? But it's a mindset that they get into that they, but it is really hard. It's not your fault that there's so much plastic, and it's really almost impossible not to buy things packaged in plastic in the grocery stores these days. I mean, you're seeing, like my sisters are outraged that you can't get mayonnaise in glass anymore, but like even peanut butter, even things that like 10 years ago were in glass are now in plastic. And I don't have it in my show, I wish I did, but there's a great image that somebody found of a grocery store shelf in the 1980s which isn't that long ago, where everything's in cardboard, glass, and metal instead of all that plastic. So this is another point that I really like people to know, especially people who work in climate, is that ExxonMobil is the #1 producer of plastics. Because a lot of people don't make that connection, although I think we're starting to see more of that now, that people have a greater awareness. So this was another fact that I was amazed by when I first learned it, that if plastic were a country, it would be the world's 5th largest greenhouse gas emitter. So that's after China, the US, India, and Russia. So I'm like, whoa, that's, it's really contributing a lot to the climate crisis. Did I just miss a note? All right, so what about recycling? So we cannot recycle ourselves out of the plastic crisis. The whole idea of recycling plastics came from the fossil fuel industry, from the bottling industry. In the late 1960s, states like Vermont were passing legislation to put the onus back onto these companies to pay for cleaning up their own waste. Until the late 60s, early 70s, Coca-Cola only made drinks in returnable, refillable glass bottles. Right? And then they decide, we can make the towns pay for the waste. We can make them pay. And then they started, a little bit later, they start putting those chasing arrows things on the bottom of all the plastics. But we can talk a little bit more about that. We can't clean it up either. Right? So there's some people think we can recycle it all. People are like, this is an illustration from an article that was in The Guardian about a year ago, last November, and it was to illustrate that the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, which is all these companies here, all the big all the big fossil fuel companies and chemical companies that you can think of, they say, we're going to clean it up. They're always saying that. The reason we have this problem is not because we're making too much plastic, it's because people are littering. Anyway, internationally, only about 8.5% of all plastic has ever been recycled, but most of it. And when you recycle plastic, you're just downcycling it, which means it's getting downcycled once, usually into polar fleece fabrics, synthetic fabrics. It's not getting recycled like a glass bottle could be infinitely recycled into glass over and over again, right? But in the United States, a study that Beyond Plastics did with Jan Dell, who is the leader of a group called The Last Beach Cleanup in California. She's amazing. She's in that movie, The Story of Plastic. They discovered in the United States only about 5% of all plastic is getting recycled. And what was I going to say about that? So the process of manually, which is the traditional way of recycling, is very toxic because it releases tons of microplastics and microfibers, nanoplastics into the air. But the other idea that people have about recycling is called synthetic recycling, which is basically just a form of incineration. So this slide shows you where all this plastic packaging is going now. So like 40% is going to landfills. A lot of it blows off of garbage trucks or people litter it, so that's like 32% here. In Massachusetts, we're actually incinerating a lot more than in other places, and the incinerators in Massachusetts are all located in, I think we have 11 in different environmental justice neighborhoods. And a couple years ago when I was testifying for the bottle bill, waiting for my turn, I heard like heartbreaking testimonies from people in Saugus who live near the Saugus incinerator. All right, so I'm on a tear right now about Ridwell. Hi, Sue, come on in. So Ridwell is an organization that is a pay to recycle plan, I guess you call it, but it's where you pay the company, they give you a box or an envelope, and you send all your hard to recycle, well, they're actually impossible to recycle plastics back to them. So Ridwell's one that's based in Seattle, but right now they are targeting Massachusetts. Last week, this week, and next week, they're going to 20 different locations in Massachusetts because they know that we are eco-conscious and we care about the environment. And so they are actually going to Unitarian Universalist churches, they're going to art museums, they're going to art centers, so that people who tend to have a more open mind or want to do the right thing. So Ridwell is a relatively new one. But I've heard from a member of the staff at Beyond Plastics who lives in California that they have filled up warehouses with plastic. There really is nowhere for this stuff to go. It's plastic films, plastic bags, the plastic that might be wrapped around a package or something. TerraCycle is another one that's been around longer, and they're based in New Jersey. There's a great movie called The Myth of Recycling. I also know about a lot of movies, which I can tell you about, and some of them are listed over there, which shows that these investigative journalists went to Eastern Europe and they found bundles of plastic trash, really, with the name of this one particular woman who lived in Shaftesbury, England, who it turned out had been collecting all these old chip bags and all that kind of stuff from her neighbors, thinking she was doing the right thing. And instead, it all ended up through a black market in Bulgaria. Trex is the company that recycles plastic into plastic wood, or those plastic benches, which maybe is, some people think is okay, but that stuff is all still being, it breaks easily, turning plastic. So don't be duped by these plans, because this last week and this week, I've been getting so much mail from my neighbors. In Watertown, they gave a presentation and they mailed a postcard to every single person, every single household in Watertown, and they were at the public library, and I was outraged that the library was going to sponsor them. The other thing that's happening now is the bioplastics or the compostable plastics. Again, don't be duped by these. What we need to do is we need to turn off the tap on plastic pollution. These are made with, usually with corn or sugar, and which, ancient fossil fuels are also made with plants, but they still have chemicals, and some of them have even more chemicals added to them. And you need very special composters with very, very high heat for this to work at all, and then you end up with a kind of toxic sludge in the end. So my advice, avoid the plastic altogether. This is showing that plastics are a carbon bond makeup, and then the chemicals are added on top. They're just sort of placed there. This is a slide from Dr. Philip Landrigan, who's based at Boston College now, who was at NYU for years. So some of the additives here are phthalates, bisphenols, PFAS, flame retardants. Though all of those chemicals, as another teacher I took a course with likes to say, is they don't just leach out of the plastics, they fall out because they aren't actually bonded to the chemical background. I've never taken chemistry, so I hope that makes sense to all of you. So what are they doing to us? What are these endocrine disrupting chemicals doing? They are bioaccumulating, which means the more we're exposed to them, the more they build up in our bodies. They are definitely linked to all of these disorders that you see here: thyroid, breast cancer, diabetes, obesity, infertility, low sperm count, developmental issues, asthma. and they really affect the developing fetus. So if you know anybody who's expecting a child, please try to be as gently as you can, help them try to avoid plastics. It's a very delicate situation and it's hard. I have 2 young grandchildren and I have to say it's really hard. You don't want to come on too strong and scare people too much. So where are we seeing all this plastic? It's showing up. This is a microfiber that's there in the snowflake on that side, so even in the snow. And then this has been taken up in a plant stem. Now this was actually a controlled experiment in a piece of wheat. But we are finding microplastics, nanoplastics everywhere from Mount Everest to the depths of the Mariana Trench in the ocean. So they are now in the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the soil that's growing our plants. And this is another one from Arctic sea ice. And this slide is pretty old at this point. So there's more and more plastic is being made every day. And now the other thing we're seeing is that a lot of plastic is ending up in the soil, which is why plastic is actually getting into our food as well. It's not just seafood, which I worked at the EPA briefly in the late 1980s, and I stopped eating seafood at that point, learning what was in the ocean and everything. But now it's like it's impossible to avoid, but we do our best. But if you know anybody who's a farmer, black plastic is not a good idea. A lot of people use it as mulch. So then this is another amazing photograph that shows how these tiny microplastics are getting on insects. And this is Adirondack State Park. It's far, far north in New York State. And not a lot of people live there. So this again is showing where are the biggest sources of microplastics. You see here that bottled water. So do not buy water and drink it out of those ubiquitous plastic water bottles. The picture on the side is like a little joke. My daughter's friend sent me that. I mean, she didn't create it, but anyway, it's in almost everything now. So this is to show where are they in our body. I also have a still poster of this over there, which you can look at later. So in the past few years, they've been discovering microplastics and nanoplastics throughout our bodies. And one of the most concerning one is that they are now in our brains. It should be here, yeah. So there was a study done in New Mexico by Dr. Matt Campen, who studied cadavers from 2016 and then cadavers from 2022. And he looking at what was in the brain. And this is where, I mean, you might have heard now, they're saying there's a teaspoon of microplastics in all of our brains now. But the increase from 2016 to 2022 was substantial. And because they knew how the people had died, they found that the highest quantities of microfibers and microplastics were in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. So I was recently on Martha's Vineyard, and everything is Jaws, everything on the vineyard right now because it's the 50th anniversary. But at the agricultural fair, my husband noticed this poster that was framed in the art section. I don't know if this cartoonist lives on the vineyard or not, but I thought it was pretty funny. So, now there's, in our bodies, we have almost everybody has PFAS. I just heard that Easton just banned PFAS, which is wonderful. So those are the polyalkaline substances, polyfluoral alkaline substances they were used in Scotchgard. They're often on furniture. They're no stick. They're in Teflon. Actually just read today that these celebrity chefs in California are coming out saying that they support the use of Teflon-coated cookware because the petrochemical industry is asking them to do this. And Mark Ruffalo, the actor who was in this great movie talking about PFAS contamination in Western Virginia, he was saying, do not buy into that. There is no safe PFAS. PFAS also is on almost all equipment that extrudes plastic, including, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, artificial turf. So anyway, the shark is saying I really have to go vegan because he doesn't want to eat all the stuff that is in our bodies. This is another cartoon from 2 years ago that I thought was funny. So it's a little levity here, but yeah, so now we're at artificial turf. So we're seeing more and more of this, that more and more communities are trying to install artificial turf, saying it prolongs the playing season. But artificial turf is extremely toxic, and there is no way to safely dispose of it. Actually, Kyla Bennett lives here in Easton, so maybe some of you know her. Kyla Bennett and Tracy Stewart, who lives in Medfield, are the people who discovered all the rolled up artificial turf in Franklin. I think it was in 2018 or 2019, and have done some studies on it. So I live near Newton. This was a field in Newton, Albemarle Field, where the activists and even the city councilor said they didn't want artificial turf, but the mayor overrode them, and she's using the what are those funds called that communities get for historic preservation?
CPA?
Yeah, CPA funds to pay for artificial turf. I love this poster on this side. I made that. That's a banner that we hung outside the field. We did a lot of standouts there. And this is a friend of mine who created this poster. She's in not Medfield, not Medway, not Medford, Malden. She's in Malden, where they have tried to keep artificial turf from being put into a Section 8 housing, where that's the only real grass that children in this neighborhood have to play on, and they want to turn it into artificial turf. All right, so the other issue we need to talk about is fast fashion and clothing. So if you remember back to the chart at the beginning of the talk, clothing is a fourth largest contributor, or third largest, I say here. Yeah, that's third or fourth largest contributor to plastic pollution. This is an ad I saw on a New York City subway platform last year, and I loved it because it really shows how we're using fossil fuels to cover our bodies, which is not good for our health because we can actually absorb those chemicals through our skin. There's dermal absorption of the chemicals in plastics, which if you have young people who want to have children in your life, you should try to steer them away from, especially synthetic sports clothing and tight yoga pants that are made out of spandex. This is showing where a lot of this fast fashion ends up. This is in the Atacama Desert in Chile. So when you think, oh, well, I'll just wear, a lot of people are wearing their clothing only a few times and then they donate to the Goodwill or they throw it out. It's actually illegal now in Massachusetts to throw out any textiles. And there are organizations that will pick up textiles like Helpsy, if you've heard of that one. They're based outside of New York City. I've been trying to get them to call me back and to find out exactly what they are doing with this stuff because it's great. Cotton, linen, wool, they've been recycled for years and made into paper. Yeah.
So Steve and I went to an open house at Helpsy.
Oh, good.
And it's very interesting. I mean, they have this massive network of where they send things.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it more at the end, but yeah, I keep wondering about the synthetic socks with holes in them. What the heck are you going to do with those? But anyway, I donate it because that's what I'm supposed to do. So plastics has been known as an ocean issue for a long time. And it is very disturbing how much is ending up in the ocean every year. One of the slides that I took out of this show actually would say that by 2025, which is now, there's going to be 1 pound of plastic for every 3 pounds of fish in the ocean. I don't know if we're there right now or not, but again, we are fortunate that in Massachusetts, we rarely see anything like this. This is the carcass of an albatross that has died from eating plastic. So these sea creatures will often mistake, especially like orange and red plastics, for shrimp and other things that they traditionally eat. And these plastics absorb the smells from the ocean, so they often think, oh, that's crab or whatever. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. No matter how you approach the plastic pollution issue, if you care about animals, if you care about climate, if you care about environmental justice, we need to get rid of plastic, basically. So these are elephants who are eating plastic trash, who actually, many of them end up dying with their bellies full of plastic. There's also images of camels that have starved to death because they've eaten so much plastic in the desert. So when your bathtub's overflowing, you need to turn off the tap, and it's time to stop making plastic. This is a photograph I took of myself my husband Guy actually took the photo a couple of years ago, trying to illustrate, that this is like an overwhelming issue. This makes my tub look shorter than it is. I don't know what's wrong here. On my slideshow, it looks longer, but so what do we need to do? We need to stop making all this plastic because it's killing us. So I'm in this clear plexiglass coffin here. This was my Halloween card 2 years ago. My friend Katrin Spies, who's a performance artist based in New York City, she came up with this wonderful concept to illustrate how we're killing ourselves with single-use plastics. She actually got in, the first main time she did it was in Venice, and she got a gondolier to take her on a gondola through the canals of Venice, and it was filmed. And then there was a showing of the film in Concord 2 years ago that I went to the opening with her, and she had a fantastic outfit made out of black plastic trays and all this stuff, and I was wearing my giraffe costume, which is when I got asked to create this costume for a racial justice and climate justice fashion show. Anyway. So what do we need to do? We need to get to know our politicians on a local level, on a state level, on a national level. Maura Healey is used to seeing me now in my necklace, in my hat. Markey not so much, but I have talked to him, and I had a liaison with him for a while who worked on the plastics issues on a national level. We did have in front of the federal government a Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, but that has been totally stalled with this administration. So, do demonstrations work? Yes, I think they do. I mean, people right now keep saying they're not worth it, we shouldn't do them anymore, but this is the Earth Day demonstration in 1970, and I recently heard somebody say, who remembers what the New York Times wrote in 1970? Nobody. But everybody remembers the photographs, or if they were there, the amount of people in the streets, both during the Civil Rights movement and during the Earth Day movement. And this led to the formation of the EPA. I mean, those were different times, but still, I think it pays to keep being in the streets, using art, bringing people together, creating community. Nothing else, you're going to meet people you like. Kirsty Pecci, who is the director of Just Zero and part of the coalition, I'm part of Plastic Free Mass, she always says organizing is the best way to stay sane, and meet nice people. So this is a youth movement in Boston in 2019, in September of 2019. The climate movement was really taking off, and it was amazing. And then COVID happened, like what we were talking about, Christina. This is December of 2019. My daughter and son-in-law were there at this, but I love this quotation by Rebecca Solnit, who is a beautiful writer, and I'm sure they have most of her books at the library here. More than personal virtue, we need collective action at every scale. The revolution won't happen by people staying home and being good. And I like to say, my virtuous self-actions really aren't making a difference, because I've been doing my virtuous self-actions for, like 45 years, and what have we seen? Just an exponential rise in plastic pollution. This is the March to End Fossil Fuels in New York City, where I organized with Jane, who's also in this picture somewhere, but anyway, she's in New York, to bring all these different Beyond Plastics groups together, and we had 200 people signed up to come, but I think we had like 100 to 150 of us in New York, and I was photographed by the New York Times right before the march. So I was really excited that was in the online coverage of the march. But I also liked that my hat, I had these two teenage boys come up to me and ask me, what is petrochemistry? So you can actually give a little talk, and I wear this shirt all the time because I feel like it's a way to bring the conversation to the fore. So we need to support legislation to end single-use plastics on every level. This is a website if you don't know who your elected officials are. I also have a list of priority legislation that we're working on right now. And these are some of the types of bills that we are working on and that we have worked on. This is a postcard writing party that we had to write to our legislators to try and get them to pass this stuff. But let's talk a little bit about the bottle bill. So this cartoon was created by a woman who worked at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. She was an artist in residence there for a year. She created this for us, for the Plastic Free Mass Coalition. Bottle bills really work. And we have a very old bottle bill. We have the most poorly functioning bottle bill in the world. Now, there are only 10 or 11 states that have bottle bills in the United States, but there are countries around the world that have bottle bills. And in countries in Europe, they have as high as a 98% return level. Here, we are hovering around like 38 to 40% return, because the deposit is very low and it only covers carbonated beverages. So that means it only covers seltzer water and beer, right? Soda, seltzers, beer. We need to update it so it includes all kinds of beverages. So when this was passed in the early 80s, there was no, bottled lemonade, iced tea, bottled water, all that stuff. We are having a really hard time getting this passed, partly because of, the Speaker of the House, actually, and because Polar Seltzer is based in Massachusetts, and they have convinced the legislature that it would hurt them, but it won't. And actually, this to me makes so much sense, because the state would actually make more money. More people would pick up the trash if we raise the deposit. And we want a bill that would actually increase the deposit slowly if you don't meet certain percentage targets. So there is information if you want to write to a legislator or find out more over here at this table afterwards. These are the 10 worst plastic polluters in the world, Coca-Cola being number 1. We know this from all the cleanups that have happened around the world. There's a group called Break Free from Plastic that's based in England, but it's international. And they kind of oversee all these cleanups where people report, they do brand audits. So they do a brand audit when you go to a beach or a park and you pick up, how many chip bags you're picking up, how many bottles you're picking up, how many cigarette butts. I mean, they go down, they get very specific. And it's very helpful. So they've been doing that for about, I think this is probably going to be about their 7th year. But when I found out that Coca-Cola was sponsoring COP27, so that was 3 years ago, I was outraged. And I actually wrote to them to break free from plastic. Is anybody protesting this? And they said, no, that was the COP is the Conference of the Parties, which is the international climate conference that happens every year, that has gotten very much infiltrated by the fossil fuel industry. But I wrote and said, is anybody doing anything about this? And they said no. So I said, well, I'll do something. So we went, that is when I got Leslie to start printing all the posters in red, black, and white. And I made a whole series of signs using the Coca-Cola typeface. And I went to New York City, and we had 20 of us. We marched from the UN headquarters in New York to, and I dressed up as a Coke can, in a Coke can costume that Mary Lou Nicholson, who used to be based in New Bedford, but she's in Providence now, lent me. She runs a great group called Be the Solution to Pollution. She created, with an artist, a huge monster all made out of these nip bottles that they've used in the Earth Day parade in New Bedford. Another thing you can do is you can actually send back, this is my friend Maureen McCarthy, who's based in Fort Collins, Colorado. She started this whole return to offender, return your discards back. So I've participated in a couple of these with her. I did the Hershey's candy bar wrapper. We did Frito-Lay's. They will write back to you. They have to write back to you. And she's seen results, at least on their websites, where they say they're trying to be more sustainable. Right now, she's working on plastic mesh bags and the things that clementines and onions come in. Both of us have written a lot to Driscoll's Berry Company, which is in Oregon, but they're the ones who put all the berries in those plastic, what are called clamshells. They cannot be recycled, just so you know. And they are starting to produce, they can produce them in cardboard cartons, because they do that in Oregon. All right, so the Global Plastics Treaty, I don't know if you heard about it, but the 5th and final meeting of this Global Plastics Treaty conference just happened in August in Geneva. There have been conferences in like 5 different countries. I think it was Brazil, Canada, they've been all over the world. But it failed once again because now we've had hundreds of fossil fuel companies showing up. And petrochemical countries like the United States have not been actively supporting. And the Global Plastics Treaty was amazing, and it really was trying to reduce plastic by 40% by 2040. So this is a cartoon that I found in my friend Rebecca's slide deck that she's, never stand in the way of a mega corporation that's about to make a killing from potentially harmful products. So that's why we're seeing the things like the PFAS in the cookware constantly. People are capitulating to big money. I mean, that's the story here. And Markey always likes to say fossil fuel industry is a socialist industry. We are subsidizing with tax credits the fossil fuel industry, and that is why plastic is so inexpensive, cheap, right? And we don't take into account any of the other issues. So I put these Matryoshka dolls in here because I like to say, we can do one little thing and then build upon it, build upon it, build upon it. And it is really hard to get legislation passed. So what can you do? You can work on a community group. If you're in your faith community, at your library, your workplace, your school, if you work in a hospital. I have a couple members of my group now, Beyond Plastics Greater Boston, who are doctors, and I've had them trained to give similar talks, but they are now, they're medical doctors, so they have another perspective. And but one of them, Bridget, works at a hospital in East Boston, and she has done a lot of work there to try and reduce the amount of plastics that are used in the hospital. Hospitals do not need to be using as much plastic as they are. And there are kits, the suture kits that they provide to doctors that half the stuff never gets used and they throw it out. There's all those pink basins that, you don't, anyway. Think about what you can do. Start with yourself, your family, and move up from there. So these are all I love this. I thought it was very funny. It's based on Rodin's The Thinker. But we've talked about the climate crisis, the health hazards from microplastics, and the EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals, all the environmental injustice, all the contamination. So it's time to organize, activate, and advocate to end plastic pollution. So this is the group I run, Beyond Plastics Greater Boston. So after I took the course with Judith Enck in 2021, then I became a speaker that summer because she was getting so many requests, speaker requests that she couldn't fill. She wanted to start the Speakers Bureau. And the following year, they started all these local groups and affiliates. So there are actually other affiliated groups with Beyond Plastics in Massachusetts. There's one in Plymouth, Natick, Williamstown. Anyway, I would love to have you join my group. I have a sign-up list over there. We have fun, and we've gone to some fun museums. We went to a really great museum in Amesbury, the Plum Island Museum of Lost Toys and Curiosities, which was created by a woman who found all these plastic toys and objects on the beach in Plum Island, which is where she lives, when she was walking her dog, and she's arranged them beautifully. We went to a great show at the New Bedford Whaling Museum this spring. Also created jellyfish that were created out of plastic trash that was found on the beaches near New Bedford. But there's also Plastic Free Mass. So Plastic Free Mass is a coalition of about 40 different environmental groups and progressive political groups from across the country. We are working together to try and really get some change on the statewide level. We meet every other Tuesday afternoon. We canceled today because everybody had something else to do. And we also, last week, we organized a Sustainability Day. We helped to organize a Sustainability Day at the State House. So if you're in an environmental group that would like to be more involved with plastics, you can just have your name on your logo as part of our information, or you could send somebody from your group to our meetings. I'm on the steering committee, but the leader is really Kirsty Pecci, who's based in Sturbridge, and she is also the founder of an amazing waste reduction group called Zero Waste. So this is, if you want to get, this is from Beyond Plastics. They offer these grassroots training workshops a few times, I think 4 times a year. There's one coming up here you can see in October. Judith Enck is she started her plastic pollution course for the fall on the September 3rd, I think. So it's usually on Wednesday nights, but it's only 7 weeks. And then there's a plastic and health course coming up soon that Megan Wolf, who was on the staff of Beyond Plastics, but now has branched out and started her own group. That's coming up starting in mid-October, I think. But Judith will probably offer her course again in January. So I highly recommend taking the course with her. If you're interested in doing the grassroots advocacy, you can do that too. Their website is fantastic. So if you go on their website, you'll find all sorts of information. So Judith has just written a book with some of the, only Adam here is accredited with co-writing this with her, but most of the staff at Beyond Plastics contributed to this book. It's coming out, it's going to be published in December. So you can pre-order it now. You might want to get a copy for the library, Christina. And then we only have one Earth. This is one of my banners that I made for Earth Day a few years ago. And I hung it on the gate there at the State House before a big Earth Day parade. There were a lot of people there, but I captured that here. So we all have to work together to help educate other people, to spread the word, to do what we can. And thank you so much. Thank you for listening. And I'm happy to answer any kind of questions. Does anybody want to know more about anything or take the quiz or?
Yeah, the quiz.
Yeah?
I clean for a living.
Okay, yeah.
So, long time ago, I used to use Dow bathroom cleaner and all that stuff. Now I do all green cleaning.
Nice.
But even doing green cleaning, a lot of the stuff comes in plastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I found out I get glass bottles, and then I try and use clean water.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I
mean,
and you can do it, because if you think about it, if you're using something like Dow bathroom cleaner, right? So that's in plastic. So then the cleaner that you're spraying in your house is putting more plastic.
yeah, I never thought of that. But there are a lot of refill stores now that will sell you like concentrated cleaning stuff that you can put into your own containers. And I have a handout over there of some of the refill stores. Most of them are in Greater Boston, but there is a link there to find them in other parts of the state.
Yeah, so it's, like I can give everybody a safe glass cleaner. It's 1 teaspoon of cornstarch,
Cornstarch.
2 drops of pure essential oil, and 12 ounces of pure water. You put it in a glass bottle, and
Cornstarch.
every time before you go to use it, you shake it because of the cornstarch, but it works awesome.
Wow.
It's safe. It won't hurt you.
So no vinegar, no lemon or anything like no vinegar. Okay. Great. Yeah, I always use Bon Ami, which comes in paper as a scouring agent, and I try to get all my like laundry detergent and stuff in bulk, refill places. But yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to avoid plastic. Karen.
I was just wondering if anybody that's doing anything with the dollar stores, because every time I go in there, I have a major heart attack. And right now they have a giant amount of big orange plastic pumpkins, so you can stack them. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah.
And
So actually,
it's in the all kinds of black spatulas, and I want to say, don't
yeah.
buy the black spatula.
Does everybody know black plastic should be avoided at all costs? Because black plastic actually sometimes has recycled electronic components in it. It can never be recycled because the scanners that read recyclable materials cannot register black. And it's definitely it has more chemicals in it than a white plastic.
Right.
Yeah, it's very toxic. There's another one of the members of the Beyond Plastic Speakers Bureau, Kim Cameron. She lives in upstate New York, in Tully, New York, not far from Syracuse. And she said everybody out there shops at the dollar stores. It drives her crazy. But there is a boycott organized by people of color right now of the dollar stores, basically because of their DEI policies. But I could send you more information on that. But it hasn't really been targeted in terms of plastic. But what Kim keeps saying is that we need to have information that's very easy to read, that's like at a 5th grade level, that's just bullet points to really get this across to people of all educational levels and all ages to understand the health hazards. I mean, they're luring people in with their cheap prices, right? Yeah.
So couple of quick things. So this young lady here, she is a real trooper for your cause.
I know.
I was in a thrift store with her one day, and she gathered up all the black utensils and went to the register and told them how bad these things were,
Yeah.
and that they shouldn't be selling them.
Yeah.
In a polite way, which was news to me, but
Yeah.
she's out there working, and we belong to a group together, and one of the women suggested that we use balloons for something. And she piped right up and said, "Oh no, did you know that balloons are not good for," so, the plastic and balloons and everything. So she's a real advocate for the cause, so just wanted to say that.
Yeah, she joined my group, what, 2 years ago? A year and a half ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah, she's
The other
doing great.
question that I had was, it's a little bit depressing, right?
Yeah.
Because you say that a lot of it can't be recycled, and you said that we couldn't possibly clean it all up, so what happens? What do we do with all of that?
Actually, it's better to landfill this stuff than to burn it. And it's better to landfill it than to try to recycle it. But the thing we need to do is avoid it in the first place. So it's not impossible. I mean, look back to when you were a child and think about how much less plastic there was in your life. And if you're buying whole foods, not at Whole Foods, but you know what I mean, not prepared foods, you're right there, you're gonna cut down the amount of plastic exposure you have drastically. I mean, I think one of the problems we're seeing today is how many people are constantly eating takeout, prepared foods, processed foods, et cetera, which is all contributing to all these health issues. So the rise in breast cancer, colon cancer, thyroid diseases, these are diseases that especially colon cancer, breast cancer, we're seeing as diseases of older years, but we are seeing exponential rise in these diseases in people under the age of 40. So in their 20s and 30s. And it's really, really disturbing. And there is a direct causation between these chemicals and the plastics and the amount of microplastics. So the microplastics in our bodies are, causing inflammation, which leads to disease, and obviously what I said earlier about the Alzheimer's disease. People are shocked that microfibers have been able to pass through the blood-brain barrier. And we didn't really go into this, but there's also been a study done of people with heart disease and the amount of plastics in the plaque when they took out the plaque in people's carotid arteries. They could see direct link.
Is there a connection to autism?
Oh, yeah. The autism has risen drastically since the introduction of all these plastics and the chemicals. So there's a really good book called Sicker, Fatter, Poorer by Leo Tresande that came out in 2018. He's a doctor based in New York City. He went to Harvard Medical School. He went to Harvard College, Harvard Medical School. He was at Children's for a long time, but he works at NYU, but he works with children a lot, and that's his focus, is how much these chemicals are affecting childhood disorders. There's another scientist in New York, her name is Dr. Shauna Swan, who's the person, she wrote a book called Countdown that directly shows the correlation between plastics and these chemicals and infertility, and especially sperm count. The amount of sperm that men have nowadays is like half of what they had in 1970. It's shocking. That's why you hear so much about infertility treatments. I was listening to the Democratic Convention last summer, and I was like, okay, you're talking about diabetes? Plastics. You're talking about infertility? Plastics. You're talking about breast cancer? Plastics. Why don't you go to the cause of the problem? Well, the reason they don't is because the petrochemical industry, the chemistry industry and the fossil fuel industries are the two most powerful industries in this country, if not in the world. So.
Do you think it's worth actually separating your plastics and putting them in the recycling bin, or just throw everything in the... Well,
so what they say is 1 and 2, and sometimes 5. If you look at the little chasing arrow symbol on the bottom, you'll see the numbers. They put those numbers there to make people think that all plastics are recyclable. But the clamshell ones are not, even though I think they say 1 or 2. But an easy way to do it is like if it's I always say a jug or a tub. Tubs and jugs in general, I do put into the recycling. Everything else, no. So, like a milk jug or a yogurt container or a cottage cheese container or something like that.
It's hard to think about when you've been so conscientious, right, about sorting out your trash.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk recently too, but sometimes you just find out that it's not good.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that, and maybe I was a little late coming here.
That's
It's actually
fine.
hard to find a parking spot, but that's a good thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's great to see so many people here.
Yeah, so one thing is the idea of our trash, for a lot of people, we go to the dump. I live in a different town. Our trash goes to the sidewalk and it disappears, right? So you think about kids and families, nobody really sees where it goes.
Yeah.
Right? So unless you happen to live right near a facility or a place where people are dumping, you don't really know. And I think that should be part of like education for kids, that everybody has to go to a recycling facility, everybody has to go.
Yeah, I agree.
See where it goes.
Yeah, so I'm on the Solid Waste and Recycling Advisory Committee in my town, in Watertown, and that was the first thing I wanted to do, because I had never been to what's called a MRF. What does that stand for again? It's a municipal recycling facility, and ours is in Peabody, and I was horrified by the amount of dust and plastics you see in the air, and the people who are working there are all people, mostly men of color, and one of the things they're doing is they're standing over conveyor belts and pulling out the plastic bags that get gummed up in the works. That's why you can never, ever, ever put a plastic bag in your recycling. And again, Ridwell and TerraCycle will tell you that they can recycle plastic bags. The reason we know that they're not getting recycled is people have put trackers in them. So those Amazon trackers have been put into plastic trash by all different people, including Jan Dell, who I mentioned earlier from California, and they've discovered where they've ended up. They've ended up in incinerators, or they've ended up in landfills. So do not get duped by those plastic bag recycling drop-off centers in the grocery store and that kind
So
of
like
thing.
in the supermarket, when they say you can drop off your plastic film, your plastic.
Yeah, it's all a scam. It's a scam. It's a way to make you feel like you're doing the right thing, you're being the eco-conscious consumer. Bring your own bags to the supermarket. It's not that hard. Make sure you can take a reminder card over here to put on your doorknob. I mean, I just keep mine in the trunk of my car. As soon as I unload the groceries, back they go. I mean, I keep some in the house too, because I use them to walk to the library and other places, and the farmer's market that's down the street. But yes, Karen.
I read in the resource guide for recycling here and for all kinds of sustainable issues at the Green Committee,
Environmental Stewardship Committee.
Yes, that PFAS, I was so excited that they got PFAS out of the water, but then I read that it's in your damn floss.
Oh yeah, so there's
I got
alternative.
some online. I ordered it online.
Yeah.
when I got
These refill stores also sell, you can get silk floss, you can also get this charcoal treated floss. They work really well. But yeah, it's true. Glide, which is a very common form of dental floss, has PFAS on it. So you don't want to be putting that in your mouth.
Also now.
Get yourself a wooden toothbrush, some toothpaste tablets. I mean, it's not, the thing is, even if 2 million people started using wooden toothbrushes instead of plastic toothbrushes, it's not going to make that much difference, because they're pouring so much money into the packaging and the construction and the fibers, the textiles. So
Well, that's what it's always been. It's always been about the cha-ching,
of course,
Well,
when it comes right down to it, it's all about capitalism. I mean,
anybody just.
always comes back to that. Yeah, it's hard.
I was also thinking, sorry.
Yeah.
And maybe you talked about this at the beginning, is all those clamshell containers, just think about how they expanded during COVID, right? Because
Yeah.
people were trying to keep everything safe, but now they've decided it's lightweight, it looks really pretty, people like them, and they just keep coming. And I want to say, I'm not buying anything here. I want it put in a box,
Yeah.
in a bag,
Yeah.
and just because, and maybe I'm lucky enough that I can afford to do that, but not everybody.
Exactly.
I know. Isn't it a shame that the unpackaged stuff often costs more than the packaged stuff?
I know.
But the waste industry is big money. That's why Ridwell, one of the reasons Ridwell is coming to Massachusetts right now, that pay to recycle company, is because they've had venture capitalists invest in them, and now they have to prove that they're actually doing something and get more people involved in spending their, whatever it is, $30 a month, I don't know what it is, $10 a month, whatever, to send their unrecyclable plastics back to them.
This is depressing.
All right, what are we going to do to make it less depressing? Come and look at the table. Let's turn on the lights. We can have some more casual conversations. You can sign up for my mailing list. I send out some depressing stuff, but some fun and exciting stuff. You can find out what our legislative priorities are right now. What we're really focusing on the state level is to get this bottle bill finally passed, to do a statewide ban on polystyrene, which is styrofoam. We have I think 60 different communities with polystyrene bans, and then also to finally get a uniform statewide plastic bag ban passed, because we have over 161 different cities and towns across the state that have bag bans. They're all a little bit different, and that represents over 2/3 of the population of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I don't know why we haven't gotten that bag ban passed yet statewide. And if you want to keep working on it locally, that's great too. Do you have town meeting in Easton? What do you have? Yeah. So
They're banned here, aren't they?
Yeah, November 2000.
But there's no way to hold them accountable.
I know, it's really, that's why I feel like we need the statewide ban, because it is really hard to hold them accountable. What we did in Watertown is first we had the bags had to be a certain thickness, and they had to have handles. But anyway, then they started making those ridiculous thick plastic bags. So we had to go back to the city council. We rewrote the ordinance, and they had to have stitched handles, be washable, and they had to be biodegradable or compostable, thinking that they would be cotton, right, canvas. Well, then all these compostable plastics came on the scene, and now all the shops are using these thin green compostable plastic bags, which is defeating the whole purpose of the thing. So, and then you throw your hands up in the air because you're so fed up with the whole situation.
I talked to a manager of a supermarket because I was frustrated.
Yeah.
That's actually the first bag they give you is plastic instead of paper.
Yeah.
And he explained that the plastic bag is like a third to a half cheaper.
Yeah, it's even less than, yeah. I had a shopkeeper yell at me about the cost. Do you know the difference between the cost of paper and plastic and blah, 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 and how much these cost and how much those cost? And I said, that's not what it's about. It's about getting people to bring their own, really, right? But yeah, I know the cost is a huge factor. They don't want to give the paper bags out, but that's why we need to have a ban that actually bans bags, period, which is what they did in New Jersey. So.
Once in a while you'll have success. You know how those egg cartons, they're plastic. It's actually, I find them hard to open. You have to open it like twice to get the eggs out. And I complained to the grocery store, and I said, at least they brought back some cardboard, and I said it was worth it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it's worth it. So we also did a targeted campaign against Trader Joe's a few years ago. We collected all this Trader Joe's branded plastic. Trader Joe's has a headquarters in downtown Boston. So which they had California and downtown Boston. It was the only grocery store with a headquarters in downtown Boston. So we organized a whole protest. We met in front of the State House. We had some speakers there. It was wonderful. Then we went to the Trader Joe's headquarters, and 4 or 5 of us went up and dropped off the plastic. We did a whole letter writing campaign across the country, actually, with Beyond Plastics. And then we did the Death by Plastics performance in front of South Station. It was a really great day. It was extremely hot. We did it July 25th, 2022. And it was the day Biden came to Somerset, Mass. to talk about, I don't think it was offshore wind, and all the main politicians and most of the media was there. But we got some great coverage. But anyway, we did this national campaign writing to Trader Joe's CEO to ask them to reduce, and we saw a little bit of a change. Suddenly you could see, they got some apples that are in plastic bags, and then all of a sudden this spring I noticed like all the cut up fruit in plastic and stuff that they had never even had before. So it's time to start that again. There's lots of ideas for campaigns and boycotts and things like that too. So, all right, I think we're done having everybody sit still, get up, walk around. I'm happy to talk to any of you.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.